This is the Persons of Interest podcast, diving into careers, personal stories, life lessons, and more, featuring interviews with interesting people doing interesting things. I'm your host, Derek Dockett. Thank you, everyone, for downloading the Persons of Interest podcast. I appreciate you taking time to listen and download and hear all the fantastic stories of the people I've been catching up with. Today, I'm excited to visit with a local television. Can I call you a celebrity?
Oh, no. Sure. Go ahead.
All right. That is the voice of Charlie Marlow, Fox 2 here in St. Louis, Missouri. How many years have you been at Fox 2 now?
It's weird because 2020, you forget what day and week and month it is.
Right?
So it's August of 2020. So I have been here over 12 years. It'll be 13 years next April.
Wow. It doesn't even seem like that long.
I know. It's crazy.
Well, he covers, of course, St. Louis, but specifically you've been on the high school beat, Blues, Cardinals, when we had the Rams, all that fun stuff. But how has St. Louis treated you in that amount of time you've been here?
I love St. Louis. When I came here, I never necessarily thought I would stay here for this long. Not that I didn't want to, but early in your TV days, you jump around a lot. And so after college, I was in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan for about a year and a half. Then I was in Lansing, Michigan for 2 years. And you just jump kind of market to market, and you're jumping up to bigger markets. I was actually laid off of my job in Lansing in 2008, right before or right when the recession really hit. Yeah. And just 20 people were cut from my station. So I was looking for jobs, and I saw the job in St. Louis, and I moved here. And again, I'd never been to St. Louis. I'd driven through St. Louis, but I'd never been here. And next thing you know, it's been 12 years. And like so many others, I've married a St. Louis girl.
How about that?
And I got a child, and now I'm probably never leaving.
Yeah, you're one of us now. You're definitely one of us.
Yep.
So I'm curious, how did it get started for you taking an interest in journalism and media? Was that something from high school, or you pick it up in college? What was the path that led you into working in the glorious career of broadcast journalism?
It is so glorious. That's so true. Now my goals and dreams kind of always change. I'm not saying necessarily that I'm going to do TV broadcasting or media for the rest of my life, but I have wanted to do this basically for my whole life since I could remember. Or when you're little and you say, what do you want to do when you grow up, when they ask you that in elementary school? Now, to be fair, the first thing I wanted to do was be a professional baseball player. And that, of course, did not work out for me and so many others. That's what you want to do first. But I remember I've always wanted to do TV broadcasting. When I was little, I had a paper route. I delivered the Toledo Blade in 6th and 7th grade. I had to deliver it by, I think it was either 6:30 or 7 or 7:30 in the morning. I can't remember. I'm sure I was late many days. But still, I had to wake up early and fold the papers and put the ads in before I delivered it. And I would always watch SportsCenter. And this was early, mid-'90s, Keith Olbermann, Dan Patrick, Craig Kilborn. And I always loved sports anyway because my dad loves basketball, baseball. So we were always into that. But kind of watching those golden years of SportsCenter made me want to do TV broadcasting. So that's when I was probably 11, 12, 13 years old. And I really never stopped chasing that dream.
How about that? So you found something you like, you chase it. You mentioned you didn't think the baseball career would pan out. I do know that you did take that as far as you could, including a stint on the baseball team at the Division I level, playing at Bradley University, where you got your college degree, correct?
Yes, sir. And I always try to be very honest about my baseball prowess.
And I had to bring it up. I'm sorry, because it's a thing for me.
What's that?
I said I had to bring it up because it's a thing for me. I got to be able to tell folks that you did get to see the field at Bradley. I don't think many people realize how much of athletic ability you have or had. I don't know if are you still active?
Well, I used to play in the over 30 leagues here in St. Louis with the Bud Light team. I played in that league,
so you could rake
for I think 5 or 6 years. I stopped playing about 4 years ago because my Fox 2 schedule changed where I couldn't make most of these games that are played at night. But I always say, because my college career is kind of odd, because people say, oh, you went to Bradley to play baseball. I'm like, well, kind of. So what happened was I went to Bradley. I was a walk-on for baseball. I actually had an academic scholarship. So I went there. I had contacted the coaching staff, though, before I went there. I had a summer coach who used to be a coach at Central Michigan. He knew Dewey Kelmer, who was the coach of Bradley. He had kind of set me up to say, hey, give this guy a look. You know, let him hang around. He's a catcher. Worst case scenario, he'll catch all your bullpens for you. So that first year, I was on the team. I was redshirted, and I basically just caught bullpens. And then my sophomore year, I was cut in the fall season. I was told you can stick around, you can be a team manager, you can try to play again next year. At that point, I really hadn't played a spring baseball season since my senior year of high school. So I said, you know, I started talking to people, and they said, you know, you got to play this year. So I had another summer coach I played with who was a community college coach, or he used to be in Michigan, and he set me up with another JUCO in Michigan that needed and was taking players. So my sophomore year, I played one season. I know this is long-winded, but I played one season at Glen Oaks Community College. My sophomore year, did pretty well. I hit over 300.
Look at this guy.
But for a 6'4" first baseman that hits no home runs and I think maybe one or two doubles, that's not going to get you. That's not going to get you anywhere. So at that point, I said, you know what? I gave it my shot. I can say I played college baseball, but it wasn't going anywhere. I didn't want to transfer to another Division II or Division III school just for baseball. At that point, I said, you know what? I have good friends at Bradley. I was already there for a year and a half. I knew I could go back, by the way. Before I left Bradley, I knew I could go back and get my scholarship if I wanted to. So I went back to Bradley my last 2 years, did not play baseball, just finished my schooling. I got a double major in radio, TV, and history. Finished my degree at Bradley. So I technically, again, long-winded, I was on the Bradley baseball team. I never actually played a game at Bradley because I was redshirted, then cut. However, you can look this up. Yep. I was 2001 Missouri Valley Conference all-academic team, so at least I helped out with the GPA.
And that was the whole point of the story, is you were on the team. If you look in that Bradley baseball record book, wearing jersey number 31 in 2001 was Charlie Marlow, listed as a catcher. So we got the evidence. And I think what most people don't realize, Bradley University, the communications or school of journalism, I can't remember specifically which school, but named after Charlie Steiner, longtime ESPN broadcasting personality. So Bradley has a pretty good communications and journalism program there. So you come from a pretty elite educational background.
I will say that. So the Charlie Steiner School, which was not there when I was there, I graduated in 2004. It's kind of funny, though, because I did one year apply for a Charlie Steiner scholarship, which was not a huge scholarship, but still it was funny because I did not get it. So I applied for it, did not get it. But Charlie Steiner has done so many great things for Bradley. And then I don't know when this all started, but it was after I left in 2004. But he really started to pour a bunch of money and resources into specifically, and Paul Gullifer, who ran the department for years. I'm not sure if he still does. I think he does. Don't quote me on that. But he's also, big into sports communication and journalism. He's written many books about Notre Dame, football, and Muffet McGraw. He's big into sports. So I think they got together, Charlie Steiner, Paul Gullifer. They created this specific sports communication program. So Bradley always had a good journalism communications program. But I would think now, obviously you have Mizzou and you have Syracuse and you have Northwestern and USC on the West Coast. And I'm sure they have all kinds of programs like this, and they're known for journalism overall. I do think what Bradley has with this specific sports communication program is pretty unique. And they have this annual kind of, what do they call
Symposium,
it?
maybe?
Symposium. That was the word. That was the exact word I was looking for. Symposium, where they have all these big sports broadcasters and media types go back. And a couple of years back, I was able to go there because they had Larry King. Larry King was there. I think he donated $1 million. So, yeah, Bradley definitely has their stuff going for sports communication. They're also big in engineering, but I think the sports communication program is something that's pretty cool because of Charlie Steiner, basically.
Have you been pretty proud to watch the resurgence of Bradley basketball these last couple of years? They've had a pretty good run of winning some Missouri Valley Conference tournament championships and making the NCAA tournament.
I really have, because when you go to Bradley and you don't have a football team, even though I wouldn't go back and change anything, I do think going to a college that has that football Saturday, you're missing out a little bit, in my opinion, if you don't have that. But so if you're Bradley, Bradley has a really good soccer program. They were really good when I was there, but I don't follow soccer the same way. And if your team makes the NCAA tournament, that's a pretty big deal. I remember when I started thinking about Bradley, I had known of Bradley, even though I didn't even really know where it was. But when you're growing up watching college basketball, you kind of know these schools from the NCAA tournament. And Bradley had made a couple appearances. I think they made one in the mid to late 90s. But then I get there in 2000, and they didn't make the tournament the whole time I was at school. But then, of course, 2006,
yep.
I had just taken this job in Lansing, Michigan. So it kind of stinks because Bradley played at the Palace. They played 80, 90 miles from where I was working in Lansing, but I wasn't able to go because I literally had just taken this job in Lansing, and I'm not gonna start this job in the first week. Basically, say, hey, can I have some vacation? But it was fun to watch those games, and Bradley gets to Sweet 16, and then for years you had a lot of down years, and then the last couple, Brian Wardle has things rocking and rolling, so much so that you kind of wonder. It's only a matter of time probably before a Big Six school gobbles him up, because he obviously knows what he's doing. The last couple of years, 2 years ago, I was at Enterprise Center when they had that amazing comeback to win. And, they go to the tournament, they play Michigan State, they give them a really good game. And this year, it's really disappointing for so many reasons. But, Bradley, it had been their second year. They had a senior backcourt. I really believe this was the year that Bradley could have made some noise, potentially been one of those Cinderella type teams. And we all know what happened with COVID, and they weren't able to play the tournament.
So it's funny you bring it up, because one of my questions was going to be, what's it like covering sports in the, I don't want to call it the era of COVID, but the landscape of COVID before, baseball and hockey and NBA got started back up, specifically baseball and NHL here in St. Louis. But there wasn't a whole lot. What was the routine for finding something to cover? I mean, you can talk about, I guess MLB had their labor negotiations going on for such a long time, and it's glad they were able to overcome all that. But what was it like to, cover sports? Of course, maybe you didn't have a whole lot of time, allowed for you guys since there was so much other stuff going on. But what'd you guys do to fill the time?
Yeah, and even if you don't have as much time, even if they cut your time, you still got to come up with daily content. And that's where I don't want to say I'm lazy, but I will say that I do appreciate. Now, some people love to dig for stories, to be enterprise journalists, and I'm not saying I don't like that every once in a while, but I appreciate kind of the daily grind of just having a Cardinals game, having a Blues game, having a Blues practice or a skate to cover. Back in the day, when you covered the Rams, it was very regimented in terms of just, you knew that Steven Jackson was going to speak on one day, and that was probably going to be the angle of your story. And Sam Bradford was going to speak on another day, and that was an angle. And then maybe there was a position battle, and coach spoke on this, coach spoke every day, but maybe the coordinator spoke on another day. And you kind of fell into a routine of in many cases, the sports, the leagues, the games, the practices kind of dictated what you covered. So I will say during coronavirus, basically the first several weeks and months, and I don't think anybody thought it was going to last this long, you're just going through your email and you're going through your texts and your phone, and you're just doing a story on anyone that will answer and do a Zoom with you. it was the time where you can tell stories and you can catch up with old former Cardinals and Blues and, just talk about what's going on and this and that. But after a while, I mean, you need some games to cover. I mean, at one point you're just, you're texting people for the second time, 2-3 months later and saying, hey, you want to do another interview? And at that point, I feel like we were really, really hurting for some actual games, which is why now that you have the Cardinals rolling, you have the Blues rolling, I know it's different. It's weird. There's no fans. You got a bubble in Edmonton, but still, it's fun to actually talk about some games.
Yeah. And speaking of talking, not only you're doing your TV responsibilities, but you've also been doing radio for, I don't know, did you jump right into radio when you first got to St. Louis? I remember when you started doing the morning after and then eventually all the different shows you've been on, which some have been fantastic, some even the ones that didn't, quote unquote, last as long as they should have. But you seem to like it because you keep doing it.
Yeah, I think the first couple times I did radio was actually with Martin Kilcoyne, Mo Drummond had a show, 1380, called the
Foxhole. Yeah,
because they were both at Fox 2. I filled in on that show at first, just a couple times. Then I started doing the morning after. I want to say that was either late summer, early fall of 2008. So I've been doing it on and off basically the whole time I've been here, at least 12 years or so. And I do really enjoy radio. But as you said, it's just true. The landscape of especially AM radio, it's just a different ball game. And I'm not going to sit here and bag on it, but just structurally, it's not the same as TV, where TV is pretty settled in, where you're going to go there, you got a contract, you're going to work, you got your sales staff, they're going to do all the selling for you, you're just going to do your job. And radio, there's a lot of different people buying the stations and selling the stations, and there seems to be a lot more instability, which leads to, as you know, if you followed all the guys I do radio with, we've jumped around to several different stations over the last 12 years or so and different time slots. But at the end of the day, I think the same group of guys, for the most part, kind of switch around time slots and shows, but they enjoy doing radio together. And that's the same with me. I always look at radio as, if I can do radio for a month or 6 months or 2 years, it's all good. I never look at it and depend on it for any type of income. If I get it, it's great. But I do really enjoy it. And long term, I mean, if I could do just a radio show for 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day is kind of a long radio show. But if I wasn't doing anything else, I think that would be a different ball game. But most people, I think, will tell you that they enjoy radio because it's more laid back. You don't have to dress up. You're not wearing makeup. You can have long conversations. You're not formatted like TV.
Right.
And to me, the best radio shows, if you truly like the people you're doing radio with, you respect each other, you can joke around. It does feel like guys just kind of shooting the breeze at a bar talking sports.
Do you enjoy working with Cam Jansen? I'm speaking of, for folks that don't know, Charlie does a show with former St. Louis Blue Cam Jansen. How's that going?
I love working with Cam, and this will be nothing against any former partners or hosts, and I've had them all and worked with them all, and I've loved working with almost everybody I've worked with. But I think radio also, it's a chemistry thing.
Yeah,
it's about how do the hosts want to kind of interact, and radio also, you have to share the ball. I mean, there are some radio shows where it's one guy or gal and they just want to be the host. Other ones are two hosts and maybe it's a timeshare. But another show might be, two hosts, but one person usually kind of talks 75% of the time. The other person talks, 25% of the time. I think Cam and I work well together, and we've talked about this a lot, just for several reasons. Cam is obviously a big-time hockey guy and played in the NHL for 10 years. He knows everything about that sport. I'll be the first one to tell you that hockey is not my forte. And so to be with a hockey person that can really carry the load on that sport works. And I think Cam would tell you that he is not Mr. Baseball, although he gets into it, he studies it, he learns it. He's really into the radio thing. I mean, he watches the games, he takes notes, he's checking the box scores, but I would say baseball is kind of what I love talking about the best. So I think when you're in I was going to say two-sport town of St. Louis, now we have St. Louis City SC Soccer, of course, but I think for a radio show in St. Louis to have a hockey person and then somebody who's more of a baseball guy, I think that works. And also just Cam and I, we kind of work well together. We're relatively the same age. We both kind of want to be about, relatively speaking, 50% of the show, even though it's called the Cam Jansen Show. I think he likes kind of bouncing stuff off me. So even though it's 1 hour and who knows what's going to happen in the future, I've really enjoyed working with Cam, and I would love to do it as long as I can.
I am very excited that you are doing the podcast with your boss, Martin Kilcoyne, the Martin coworker, colleague. Okay. There obviously has to be a backstory there that I'm missing.
No, I'm just joking.
Okay. I appreciate you guys doing it because Martin has always been one of my favorites to listen to going back to the morning grind days. And I always appreciate his lightheartedness. And it's literally just two guys sitting back and talking. Did you have to twist your arm to get back into doing that? Because I don't know if there was a big, we miss Charlie, we miss Martin. And then when Martin was no longer doing 590 or 550, he was sort of just out there. But he jumped in with some other projects, and I was excited to see that you two had a weekly thing going and still going. So how's that been working out?
That's fun. And we usually tape it Monday mornings or Sunday nights. And I don't think it's ever been longer than 30 minutes.
Yeah,
we always joke about, we had this radio joke about how in St. Louis you can get anywhere in 20 minutes, which really sometimes it's more like 27 minutes. But that's been kind of the joke with the podcast is we always want to keep it in the 20s, even if that's 29 minutes. But yeah, I don't ever mind. Martin and I think also work well together, and we had the show for 2+ years, which I really enjoyed doing as well. And I think when Martin got out of radio, I know he's doing some 550 right now, and he did some stuff with Scoops with Danny Mac. But I think people that do radio, you want to have some type of presence and all that. So he's doing the podcast thing, and I could see myself doing more podcasting definitely if I don't have a radio opportunity with terrestrial radio. For me,
right.
I also feel like I don't want to say I'm overexposed, but you have so many different outlets to get your opinions out there, right? I mean, I'm on Fox 2 a lot, even though it's not really opinion based, but I can throw out some commentary every once in a while. And I get to do the show with Cam usually 4 days a week. It's only an hour, but still, I feel like, hey, if I have an opinion, I can get it out there. I love being on Twitter. I love throwing out jokes and opinions on Twitter. So a weekly podcast with Martin is great as well. I wouldn't want to do a daily podcast right now. I just think doing the radio show with Cam is enough for me. And I got some other projects, work-wise going around outside of TV, and I'm married. I got a 2.5-year-old daughter. So, you got different stuff pulling you in different directions. But yeah, I could definitely see down the road if radio didn't work out, and who knows what the future of radio is. I have a lot of ideas in the future, and it's not even necessarily podcasting, but it's more video-based stuff. I mean, I love doing radio, but my background has always been more video, and I've always been a person that's been able to shoot it and edit it and voice it and do the reporting, and I still enjoy doing that. So I do think in the podcast realm, I could see myself doing something down the road that's basically in that genre, but more video based.
You're Charlie, the multimedia guy.
Well, I mean, in the current landscape of TV, especially, I mean, you almost have to do all those things.
Yeah.
It's crazy because when you graduate, I graduated 2004 and I start in a really small market. I'm shooting, I'm anchoring, I'm reporting, I'm producing, I'm editing. I'm running the teleprompter myself on the set. And then you start moving up. You go to Lansing, Michigan. Okay, you got some photographers, this and that. Then you get to St. Louis, which, it's a big market. It's market 21 in the country. And you get here and it's union. You can't shoot. And then in the last 10, 12 years, everything's changed. So now it's almost like you're going back to what you were doing your first job, where once again, even in a big market like St. Louis, even in a big market, some of these, Chicago's of the world, you have people who are MMJs, multimedia journalists, who are doing the shooting, the editing, and they're able to kind of do everything because nowadays you need versatile people. You need people that can do a lot of stuff. And Derek, you know this because you can do everything on computers and graphics and all that. I mean, you need people who can edit and shoot, and how important is posting to social media and getting your videos out there on the internet. You kind of have to do all that.
For the record, the last episode of Martin and Marlow, week 12, it was 35 minutes and 35 seconds.
Yeah. I think at the end there, we started getting into some nonsense. And then I could feel that getting long. But you know what? Even then, like, I would always look at a podcast like this, because I never listen to podcasts. And that's no criticism of any podcast. That's just not my thing. Like, my wife listens to podcasts all day long. She loves podcasts. She has all her different scheduled podcast days of the week. She knows when they drop. She's excited to listen to them. I usually, if I'm in the car, I'm listening to terrestrial radio, usually 590, obviously. But I do think if you have a podcast, for me, I would appreciate a podcast that can just get me there in my commute.
Yeah.
Like 26 minutes, 35 minutes. If I have to drive 20 minutes to work, that's the perfect time to just listen. I don't want to listen to a Joe Rogan 3-hour podcast, even though I think he's super talented. That's just not what I'm into. Now, I guess if you have a long car ride, that's a different story. But for me, I'd like that 25-minute podcast as I'm driving to and from work.
Well, with that in mind, I've hit the 26-minute mark on this recording, so I think you all should go and follow Charlie on Twitter at @CharlieMarlow_. Why the underscore at the end of the name? Is that what was
Only
available when you signed up?
Charlie Marlow was not available, and I guess I should have probably done something different, and put Charlie Marlow TV
it's
or
unique.
This or that. But at this point,
unique.
I don't even know if I change it. Will I mess with things? Will I lose followers? I don't even know how.
You don't want to lose your blue check mark. You keep it so you don't lose your blue check mark. You don't want to go messing around with that.
Yeah, I should have probably re-thunk that name back in the day, but I did it, and it is what it is at this point, so I'm just going to keep it.
Charlie, thanks so much for your time, man. This is fun. I appreciate it, and keep up the good work, man. Obviously, I am a podcaster like your wife, and I do have regularly scheduled ones, and several of the shows that you're on, I regularly listen to. So appreciate the hot takes and keeping it lighthearted.
Well, Derek, thank you. And now that I know, I am going to listen to your podcast. You got to tell me how I subscribe and all that, because I'm literally a dinosaur in that sense. Like, I don't know how to do any of that.
That's hard to believe.
To tell me how to do it.
That's hard to believe, but whatever. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to this episode of Persons of Interest. Do me a favor. I'd really appreciate if you took a moment to leave a rating or review about the podcast. Head over to Apple Podcasts, and if you don't subscribe there, just search for Persons of Interest, and you'll find it. I really appreciate the support, and if you have any suggestions for future guests or how I can make the podcast better, just shoot me a tweet at DDocket on Twitter, or you can head over to my podcast page at anchor.fm/persons of interest and leave a voice message. You never know, I just might use it on a future podcast episode. Thanks again for listening to Persons of Interest.